Welcome to Behind the Scenes at the Hanover Theatre. Now, here's your host, Lisa Condit.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in and listening to this episode. Very excited today to talk with Kevin Remington. Kevin plays the role of Fred Mertz in the national touring production of I Love Lucy live on stage, and that is a part of the Hanover Theater's subscription series on sale now, and that is coming March 6th through 8th. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello there. How are you?
Excellent. Now,
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thanks for agreeing to talk with us. And so, let me ask you, do you remember watching the episodes of I Love Lucy back in the day?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up watching it, and it always made me laugh as a kid, and then as an adult, and then when I started going to begin, when I went to study to be an actor, I remember several of my teachers saying, if you really want to see good comedy, watch I Love Lucy, for timing and rhythm and all of that. So I've seen it at different stages of my life, and I've always benefited from it, and now I get to actually do it.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's a thrill.
It is. I remember watching reruns by the time I was watching it, but it was my older brother's favorite show because he thought it was just so hysterical. And I just remember really enjoying the chemistry between all of the characters on stage. But before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about you and how you got into this whole acting bug.
Well, I'm a native Californian. I grew up in San Diego, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that my parents were pretty adventurous. And we did a lot of traveling as a kid, and we traveled in ways that were not so standard. We did a lot of sailboat traveling,
Ooh.
So I saw a lot of nooks and crannies of the world, and I think people started fascinating to me from the very beginning, different people from different places, and I think that's really what led to me wanting to be an actor, just seeing all these interesting people that we would run into. I studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and did a lot of classical theater in the beginning, and I also was a dancer for a long time.
I have a special place.
I've done a lot of different stuff in the theater, and that's kind of I think that's kind of how I got started. I was lucky enough to have a very active high school department and theater department, and so I got sort of bit really early, and I've been doing it ever since.
Well, that's wonderful. And, I have to tell you, I have a special place in my heart for all dancers out there because I myself danced for about 15 years, was a dance major. Absolutely. And I'm just curious, how old were you when you started dancing?
I was kind of old when I started. I didn't really start training until I was about 14 or 15. Was when I started ballet training, and but when you're male, I mean, unfortunately, you get an advantage. You kind of get a pass, because there's always, we don't have enough boys, So, but I started, at that age, which they always said to me, "Oh, you're too old to start taking ballet," but I did, and danced in a few ballets, and then realized that if I did musical theater, I could make more money. So I learned how to tap dance, and the rest is history.
Well, and it's wonderful too because ballet, that's the building block of, as far as technique goes, for all of the other things that you really would do in dance.
Yeah, I mean, it's also helped me as an actor, a lot.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, ballet gives you a real intense awareness of your body from, head to tip of toe to fingertip, and it really, really, really gives you full body awareness. And so, as an actor, I approach everything first from the physical. How does the character walk? How do they stand? Why do they walk that way? Why do they stand that way? Did they have an injury in the war? Or so everything for me starts with the physical, and then I go from there. And then once I learned how to sing, the vocal is an extension of that. It's part of the physical, I think. It's a different department, but so I applied the same, kind of methodology as an actor that I did as a dancer. Why is the character moving? Why do I do this step? And I was lucky enough to have instructors who emphasized acting as a dancer as a really important component. And so,
oh, absolutely.
Now as an actor, I look at the physical first, the vocal, the physical first, and then, I go from there. I don't approach it from the psyche. I usually go from looking at what does this character move like and what do they sound like and why,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, and dancing has really helped me with that. And then playing Fred, he was a vaudevillian, so
Perfect.
The hoofer in me is definitely, it snaps right into place for this, because he has that kind of crazy dancing style that he does.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, too, because tap is so much more complicated than anybody really realizes, because it's not just moving your body, but it's making a sound with your feet as well, and there's clarity in that
It's being
tone.
a percussionist,
With your body.
Yeah, with your body, and it's, it's a whole other, that's a whole other ball game. But I think tap requires even more musicianship than any other form of dance.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand what a drummer does, really.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I really like about what you were saying is that you started later than most people would consider starting at dance, and I think that that's so valuable, especially for boys, as you point out, because. Just out of curiosity, were you active in sports? Were you athletic before you started?
I wasn't active in sports because my dad was a high school football player in Oregon. He came from the Pacific Northwest, and he absolutely didn't want any of us involved in sports because he had so many injuries. He's like, no, you're going to ruin your body, and they don't care. And he was very much against it. And so, but we were very athletic in that we rode bikes, and we I grew up on a sailboat. So I mean, and we did snorkeling, and so we were really active. But he almost prohibited. He kind of did prohibit us from playing sports because he didn't want us to have that experience of getting injured so young, and it did affect him later in life.
Right.
So he was like, absolutely not. Which is interesting. It's not the American norm really, and my mom was a pediatric nurse practitioner, so that that
so she
compounded
saw
that problem.
right.
Like, absolutely not, So, but I mean, we were very active as kids, and my parents very active as well. So,
well,
yeah.
and in a way, that's a lot healthier because you're talking about life sports and life activity where you're not so prone to repetitive injuries.
Correct. Yeah.
That then, as you say, can be debilitating later in life. So, it's interesting. As dancers go, too, you're trained to stretch and warm up and really take care of and be aware of how you're moving, what that range of motion is, and how hard you're training and exerting yourself.
Yeah. Well, and believe me, I've had my share of, I've broken probably every toe on my body and almost every bone in my feet. Or fractured them or whatever. But, I mean, I've had my share of injuries because I also did a lot of acrobatic stuff as well. Of
course.
And, when you're 18 years old, you don't think about that, and you fall into an orchestra pit and go, I'm okay, or whatever. So, I mean, it's. I was just telling, I did actually fall into an orchestra pit one day during a rehearsal. Thank God it was filled with cardboard boxes. But I told that story to Serena, who plays Lucy, the other day.
Oh, boy.
And she was, of course, horrified. And I said, I was 18 years old. I, bounced right out of it and said, I'm fine, Now, if I fall into an orchestra pit, I'd probably be like, take me to the hospital,
Well, you'd probably have to be rushed to the hospital. It's funny you say that. Our production manager is always talking about the danger of falling into the orchestra pit because
the reason it came up is because we were on stage yesterday at the theater where we currently are, and I guess I came a little too close to the edge for some people's taste. And I explained to them, I said, I'm very aware of the edge, even though it may not seem so. So I told them the story. But so your production manager did they?
No, he has not fallen into the pit. However, he is acutely aware of the injuries that can happen, and that always seems to be a topic that comes up at our staff meetings at least twice a year. And
it's
honestly,
dangerous. I mean,
we're not worried about the actors on stage. We're more worried about the other people, in the audience or clamoring to see the stars on stage and then falling into the orchestra pit, which I know is crazy.
Right,
but we'll try and stay contained.
It Pardon me?
We'll try and stay contained as an audience as we get caught up in the I Love Lucy antics that you're going to be
doing. The I Love Lucy security detail will take care of that.
Oh, that's so great. So any just tidbits of advice that you have for people who might be starting out before we go to a quick break?
You mean actors or artists like that?
Yeah.
Well, the thing I find is that you have to, you really just have to work your bum off. You can't stop working. And I'm over 45, and I'm still working on stuff, trying to perfect skill. And also, you have to, when you're not feeling confident, because we all have those days, the best thing to do is to fake it.
Absolutely.
Until you get it. Fake it till you make it.
That's right.
Confidence is really important, but it comes from being prepared. So being prepared and, being trained and, in all areas of the craft, you have to be ready. And in fact, I was, an instructor of mine told me once a long while ago, I was going to go to New York and audition for a pretty big show, and this was a while back, and I said, I'm going to be in New York, and I'm going to go and audition. And she wrote me back, and she said, no, you're not ready.
Oh.
You're not ready.
Well, so sometimes
here are the steps, that you need to do before you do that, because you're going in for a big Broadway show, and that is a life-changing step,
Absolutely.
And of course I was disappointed, but I realized, you know what, she's right. I have to slow down here and really think about, what this means. So it just, like I say, be prepared always and have good coaches and people like that around you that you trust, that will tell you the truth about what you should or shouldn't do.
Well, that is great advice. So everybody stay tuned for more as we continue the conversation after this quick break.
Now, back to more of Behind the Scenes at the Hanover Theatre. And your host, Lisa Condon.
Thank you again for tuning in as we continue our conversation here with Kevin Remington. Kevin plays a part of Fred Mertz in the national touring production of I Love Lucy Live on Stage. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect as we get transported back to, 1952?
You got it, 1952. Well, the experience that the audience will have is really of being the studio audience at a live filming of 2 episodes of I Love Lucy at the Desilu Playhouse. And, the audience if you watch the I Love Lucy show, the audience is a hugely important component because you can hear them laughing, and that was the first time that television was filmed before a live audience. And they invented that format, and we still do it to this day. And for us, in the stage production, the audience is another character in the show that we very much pay attention to and take into account every single night.
And how fun is that? Because this is the precursor, really, to reality TV. You can't take it back when it's live, right? So
right.
What happens when there's a goof-up?
We just move on. We had one. We had one just recently where a curtain didn't open.
Uh-oh.
And we couldn't go forward, and so the actor who plays Ricky Ricardo, he just, went right out to the audience and said, hey, because this is what Desi Arnaz would have done, he went out and told the audience, we have a problem, we're going to have to fix it, but thanks for your, and he had them sing the I Love Lucy theme along with him while, he vamped until the problem was addressed, and we went back and started all over again.
How fun is that?
So that's kind of an interesting sort of out that we have. If something technical does go wrong like that, we can always say, hey, this is a live filming of a television show, so things happen, and it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we just continue sort of in character and in as it would have happened then if a camera broke or a light dropped from the ceiling or whatever. They would have stopped and spoken to the audience and started back again.
How fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting, too. There are 4 main characters. Tell me a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about how they interact with each other. And this is based on the filming of 2 of their most popular, hilarious episodes, right?
Yeah, well, the episodes are not as well known, but they were chosen for different reasons, mainly because, we have a live band. That is the Tropicana Orchestra with Ricky Ricardo. It's a smaller version of that, but a really fantastic band. And they wanted to make sure that we had enough opportunity for live music. And so we do The Benefit, and we do an episode called Lucy Has Her Eyes Examined, which are pretty early episodes, and they're not as well known as some of the others. But again, they sort of fit certain criteria that, they had live music and We only need to see the apartment in the Tropicana and them, things like that. We didn't have to have a bunch of scenery, but yeah, the four characters, we interact, as they do. The one thing that we all kind of learned over the time that we've been doing it is that they, in a way, there's an echo of family. Fred and Ethel are their best friends, but they also sometimes are older brother, older sister. They're sometimes mom and dad. And Ricky and Lucy are sometimes kids to them, and they're friends to them, and they're, so there's all these interesting family dynamics that happen between the four of them that are very interchangeable, and it's one of the reasons why we think that the show has so much appeal. I mean, it's been on television continuously since 1951 for 60 plus years, so it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. So some of the feedback is an absolutely brilliant and utterly engaging tribute to that iconic television show. That was The Examiner. Those nostalgic for 1950s America will have their internal time clocks rewound.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the best sightseeing bets in town. Now that's interesting. A big variety show for your money. So by variety show, I think people, because this is part of our Broadway series, they're not sure, is it a musical? Is it a play? How does it balance the two?
We like to say that it's a play with music, and that's actually part of the show that I haven't covered, but there, we do two filmings of the show, but there's a host. The character's name is Maury Jasper. He's played by Mark Christopher Tracy, who's an amazing actor, and he's kind of an amalgam of Art Linkletter and Steve Allen and all the great television hosts. He's really a wonderful actor, but he really takes the audience through the experience. He tells them where they are and when it is, and he keeps that 1950s thing going like nobody's business, and because he knows his history, but basically, he's the host is a component. Of course, the episodes of I Love Lucy are a component, but between each scene, because we have to change the scenery and the costumes for the Lucy characters, there's a group called the Crystal Tone Singers, and they come out and they'll perform some of the really hilarious jingles of the day, which at the time when they were doing television, they would do commercials in the studio. They didn't cut to a filmed commercial in the beginning. They would have somebody, like that's famous, the dancing box of cigarettes or whatever,
Right.
So we do some of that. We do some fun stuff with Speedy Alka-Seltzer and Brill Cream and things from the time. So the Crystal Tones are a major component in that they kind of bridge the gaps between scene to scene to scene in the episode. And they do songs from the day and just things like that. And then some of them actually play some of the supporting characters in the Lucy episodes as well.
Oh, that's so fun. And when you're talking about how the ads used to be filmed right in the station, I find that absolutely fascinating and, frankly, a little bit more entertaining than the mass-produced, chic, slick ads that we do ourselves.
It has the whole, because because, we're talking about the very beginning of television, and a lot of it on the behind-the-scenes side really kind of feels very homemade and handcrafted, whereas now today with all the technology, it's all very slick and fast and glamorous. And whereas back then it was it was a little more like a mom and pop kind of operation.
Well,
and,
wasn't our whole country a little bit more mom and pop really in the 50s?
Exactly. And I think they were very conscious of the fact, not just the folks behind I Love Lucy, but in general, beginning of television, they really were conscious of the fact that they were going into people's homes, and the technology was so new, and there's a big laugh at the beginning of the show where Maury Jasper says, in just 3 weeks through the miracle of television, you'll be able to see this episode on your 21-inch Philco, television set.
How funny.
It gets a huge laugh when they say 21-inch, because now, of course, television sets are the size of, somebody's couch. But they were very conscious of the fact that they were going into people's homes, and they always kept that in mind, it seems.
Yeah.
That you were actually a guest in someone's home, and that you had to behave accordingly,
So what's your favorite part about doing this show, or what's your favorite scene?
I don't have a favorite scene, but I mean everything that Fred Mertz is a great character in that William, because I also play William Frawley. Really, I have to play him as well as Fred Mertz. I don't necessarily do a scene as William Frawley in the show, but in order for me to get to Fred Mertz, I had to really learn who Bill Frawley was. But so to me, it's interesting all the way throughout because I am doing this sort of double-decker kind of acting, which is always really fun, difficult but fun. But
so I have a question. I don't really know that much about him. What are some of the things that you learned when you did your research on the actor who plays Fred Mertz?
He was a guy who was a vaudevillian for the most part, and it wasn't until very late in life that he had success on Broadway. And I myself took about a 20-year break, and this is something I only just realized. I took about a 20-year break from acting, and it wasn't until right before I Love Lucy that I kind of started getting back into it. And I was doing some research about him the other day, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm, over 45, as I said earlier. He didn't start really doing stuff really significantly until he was, around my age. And so seeing that parallel is kind of an interesting thing where it's like, oh wow, now I'm acting in this show that everybody knows, I Love Lucy, and so that's kind of been an interesting journey for me, but he had his success happened very late, and he was 64 when he started I Love Lucy.
Wow.
Yeah, so
there's hope for all of us, is what you're saying.
Exactly, and it's actually been an inspiration to me restarting a stage acting career this late in my life, and so it's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. But as far as my favorite part of the show, I think really it's the audiences. The audiences, they really are, when the four of us are on stage, they really are a fifth character for us. We have to listen to everything, not just, they laughed here, they laughed, but the subtleties of it. We've gotten to the point where we identify, sort of different kinds of laughter, or there were a few groans there, and do you know what I mean? So the audience really, we listen to the audience very, very intently, and with an ear for detail in who they are and what makes them tick.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. It has been so enjoyable speaking with you, Kevin. I can't
Thank you.
wait.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, I can't wait to see I Love Lucy live on stage at the Hanover Theatre March 6th through 8th. That's next year, 2015. Yes, we're planning for 2015. Yay. And everybody, we'll see you at the theater. Check out our website, thehanovertheatre.org. And once again, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful good time.
Perfect.